My name is Morgan Johnson, and I'm a sexologist and a counselor in training. I work for the Center for Relationships here in Austin, Texas, and I'm currently producing a month-long sex education series for Couple Strong, which you can find at couplestrong.com, called the Super Sex Series. And today I am going to talk about some of my favorite books and research about sex and relationships. Just for you guys, I've got something for pretty much everyone. So the first author that I'd like to introduce you to is Mary Roach. One of my favorite books of all time right here is Bonk, and I'm just going to read you the back of the book to give you a little teaser. Can a person think herself to orgasm? Can a dead man get an erection? Is vaginal orgasm a myth? Why doesn't Viagra help women, or for that matter, pandas? In Bonk, Mary Roach shows us how and why sexual arousal and orgasm, two of the most complex, delightful, and amazing scientific phenomena on Earth, can be so hard to achieve, and what science is doing to make the bedroom a more satisfying place. I would definitely recommend this book if you have never read anything about sex or relationships. It's just a massive, massive undertaking. Mary Roach is just so brilliant. She's got so much research in here. It's really practical, and she's also just hilarious. She's got a great tone and sense of writing that's really personable, and you really don't need to be like a psychiatrist or a neurobiologist at all. Anyone can read this book and learn so much about sex. Mary Roach, highly recommended. Another book that I would recommend to anyone who's just kind of starting their adventure and learning about sex and relationships is Emily Nagoski. This book is a Bible for, it's like it literally is called like a master's class in the science of sex, but I would literally consider this a little mini master's course. Any of you guys can pick this up and start having better sex almost immediately. She is also a great writer and really hilarious. She explains the nervous system in a super easy to understand way. So maybe if you're having trouble with initiating sex or understanding how the male and female nervous systems are wired, you can read Emily Nagoski and start having better luck at coming on to your partner and getting reciprocation immediately when you know more about the body. And she does such a great job explaining in really easy to understand terms. So Emily Nagoski, come as you are. Let me see if there's anything on the back I want to read you guys. Yeah, let me read the back for you for sure. Emily Nagoski. Researchers have spent the last decade trying to develop a pink pill for women that functions like Viagra does for men. So where is it? Well, for reasons this book makes crystal clear, that pill will never exist. But as a result of the research that's gone into it, science has discovered surprising truths about what does work to maximize women's sexual well-being, including turning on the ons and turning off the offs. Your brain interprets sexual response as a series of gas and brake pedals. Too many women work to press the accelerator without understanding that first they need to let up on the brakes. 2, taking control of the context. Just as tickling can be fun in a positive context, but irritating in a negative context, almost any sensation, especially a sexual response, requires a positive context to make it a pleasurable one. And 3, responsive desire. The classic male response is one of spontaneous desire, but for many women, desire is more responsive. It's completely normal to require a sexy context in order to get aroused. So yeah, check out Emily Nagoski, Come As You Are. Fabulous, fabulous book. She's an incredible author. Next, I'd like to recommend Michael Bader for anybody who maybe struggles with accepting parts of their fantasy world. His book, Arousal, The Secret Logic of Sexual Fantasies, is one of my favorite books on sex and fantasy. I'm going to read the back of Bader's Arousal for you to give you a little preview. In this new and fascinating, provocative book, Dr. Michael Bader offers a groundbreaking new theory of sexual desire. Drawing on his 25 years as a psychotherapist and psychoanalyst, Dr. Bader demonstrates that rather than being programmed by biology or society, sexual fantasies and preference are really psychological antidotes to unconscious dangers. Armed with this novel theory, men and women will no longer feel the need to feel ashamed about what arouses them or confused about what arouses others. It's just no nonsense, straight to the point, really easy to understand book. I just love it and would recommend to anyone, especially if you're struggling with the meaning or feelings you might have, maybe some self-judgment about the types of fantasies you have, because there is no shame in any of your fantasies, you guys, and this book will definitely help you see that. So next I want to bring up two authors that I think go really well when read as a pair, and that's John Gottman and Esther Perel. So first, let's talk about John Gottman. He kind of represents one major school in relationship and couples therapy, which is the notion that intimacy and long-term relationships really require a foundation of friendship, like a really solid connection, and without that friendship, you can't really have intimacy. So John Gottman writes amazing, amazing books. He has so much research. He has a lab called the Love Lab where he actually studies couples like in very naturalistic settings. So he just has vast amounts of data. So I think I'd first recommend the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. He also has another great one called What Makes Love Last, which is another big kind of summary of research from the Love Lab, but for the purposes of just understanding kind of the bulk of his research and knowing his major findings about relationships and kind of the factors that tend to be associated with couples that stay together. This is the one I recommend first. So I'm going to read the back of 7 Principles to give you a little taste for Gottman. Most marriages would be happy, lifelong partnerships if only couples knew how to correct the destructive behavior that leads to divorce. In this practical, easy-to-use guide, psychologist John Gottman reveals the simple truths behind happy marriages. Having scientifically analyzed the habits of married couples, he has established a tried and tested method of correcting problems. Using the 7 Principles has given him a success rate of up to 30% higher than other therapies. I think one of the greatest pearls of wisdom from Gottman's research in the 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work is this notion of turning towards our partners. He found that after studying hundreds and hundreds of couples and looking at the outcomes of their relationships, whether they stayed together, got divorced, separated, etc., he gained an ability to predict, statistically significant ability to predict if couples can stay together or not. And one of the main ways that Gottman uses in order to predict whether a couple will stay together long term is kind of how much they turn towards their partner out of all of their interactions. And couples that turn toward their partner in the majority of their interactions tend to stay together. And what I mean by turning toward, Gottman gives a great example in the beginning of his book. There's a couple in the office, in the waiting room, and the husband's at the window and the wife is sitting in a chair reading, and the husband says, "Oh, look, honey, look at the boat in the bay." And she sits up in her chair and puts her book down and looks out and says, "Oh, yeah, honey, look, it's just like the schooner we used to sail where we summer. Isn't it lovely?" And he says, "Oh, yeah, it's great." That's an example of turning toward. When our partner gives us a bid for attention, like he did, "Honey, look." She, instead of just like, or instead of not even looking up from her book, she turned toward. So an example of not turning toward would be if she had just not looked up from her book and said, and then he would have just been like, "Oh, okay." So I think if we want to work on our relationships and be better partners for each other, if we can just try more times than not, and it's, of course, there will always have bad days or days where it's harder to turn towards all of our partner's bids for attention, but if we can turn towards more often than not, it's going to make for a happier relationship. So in conjunction with Gottman, I'd also recommend Esther Perel. She is such an incredible author and thinker and presenter. You can see a lot of TED Talks if you just Google her as well. Mating in Captivity, I would recommend to anyone who is a couple in the 21st century. She is just so on top of what she does. So I'm just going to read the back of Esther Perel's book to give you a little teaser. One of the world's most respected voices on erotic intelligence, Esther Perel offers a bold, provocative new take on intimacy and sex. Mating in Captivity invites us to explore the paradoxical union of domesticity and sexual desire, and explains what it takes to bring lust home. Drawing on more than 20 years of experience as a couples therapist, Perel examines the complexities of sustaining desire. Through case studies and lively discussion, Perel demonstrates how exciting, playful, and even poetic sex can be in long-term relationships. Wise, witty, and as revelatory as it is straightforward, Mating in Captivity is a sensational book that will transform the way you live and love. I would especially recommend this book for any couples that may have found themselves kind of falling into the Netflix and chill routine. Maybe you're spending every evening together. You don't go on trips separately. You spend the majority of your time together. Maybe things have gotten a little boring. It's not as hot in bed. Esther Perel will help you fix that. I think one of the major jewels from Mating in Captivity is this idea that in order to foster desire and like erotic sensibilities, there has to be a sense of unknown. Mystery is a kind of too cliche word for it, but if you're too fused, if you're just with each other all the time, you know everything about each other, all each other's thoughts, everything, we call that like fusion. And there's not as much space for curiosity. It's way hotter when we have a little bit more distance and there's a bridge to cross between two people and have an unknown on the other side. That's way more erotically stimulating than just spending all of our time together and being, too close. I think a lot of couples these days can fall into that trap, especially when we start cohabitating, because you might come home from work and hang out and start Netflix and chilling, and it can be easy to fall out of your social routines. But it's those social routines that really keep things hot. Dolly Parton actually has a great quote. Someone asked her what the key to marriage was, and Dolly Parton says, "The key to marriage is to travel frequently and separately." And I think she really hits on what Esther Perel means when she says there just has to be some distance or space. Just like a flame needs a little air to get going. It's just way hotter if there's a little bit of mystery. All right, ladies, I have a book recommendation for you, or in general, Nancy Friday. I think everyone needs to read Nancy Friday just because the research undertaking that she's dedicated her life to is so vast and awe-inspiring. She does phenomenological research. So in most of her books, you'll just be encountering tons of stories from people in their own language about their fantasies, their sexual experiences. So you really get a taste for a big, broad spectrum of human experience. And you also get the research and the stats and, everything else that goes on with that. But Nancy Friday's research just has so much more texture because it's so personal and phenomenological in its nature. Men in Love is one that I would recommend first and foremost. If you're a man, it's great because it will just normalize all of the fantasies that you probably are experiencing, because she just literally, it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fantasies that men have, and just runs the gamut. And then she kind of goes through, just presents a bunch of stories from men in their own language, and then writes a bit about what she understands about each of those things, and it is just fabulous. Okay, if you haven't heard of Gary Chapman, I would highly, highly recommend that you pick up The 5 Love Languages. This book is just, I found for so many couples, the easiest way to kind of navigate some communication issues. And so the number one reason we hear people come into therapy, aside from, infidelity and things like that, is communication. You ask people why they're in therapy and couples therapy, they say communication. And statistically, when we give people communication training, it doesn't necessarily fix the problems. It's not always just communication. There can be deeper things at play. But I think communication is definitely a huge, huge piece, especially if you don't realize that you maybe experience and perceive love in different ways than your partner does, and maybe you express love in different ways than your partner does. So I'm going to read the back of Gary Chapman's book to give you a little taste. Simple ideas, lasting love. Between busy schedules and long days, expressing love can fall by the wayside. We forget to compliment, to give gifts just because, to linger in our embrace. The things that say I love you seem to either not get said enough or not get through. This is a book about saying it and hearing it clearly. No gimmicks, no psychoanalyzing, just learning to express love in your spouse's language. So the 5 love languages he talks about are words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch. And if you go online and Google the 5 love languages, I'm pretty sure you can do a quiz, or you can pick up the book and do the quiz and find out what your love languages are, because it ranks it for you by which ones are most meaningful to you. And then you can have a really useful discussion with your partner, about maybe ways that you can show each other love and feel that love better. Because sometimes you feel like you're showing so much love for your partner, but they're just not hearing it because it's not in their love language. Maybe your partner's love language is quality time and your love language is physical touch. We see that in a male-female dynamic a lot of times. So maybe you're just trying to touch, and your partner's not really feeling like the type of fulfilling, meaningful love that you are from your physical touch. When just, offering to spend time with her in the garden might be like what she really wants. So it's really good to read the 5 love languages together. Just get 2 copies, read it together, and then talk about, ways that make you feel really loved together. Okay, fellas, I have a book recommendation specifically for you next, and it might be really best for those of you who excel in primal forms of seduction and who are maybe a bit more gender stereotypical in your approach to sex. The manly man, kind of less sensual, more American, less European type. Nothing wrong with that, but let's always be trying to advance ourselves and become more sexually intelligent, right? I would highly recommend Ian Kerner, She Comes First. He also writes a great book called Passionista, but I want to read the back of this book for you because I think it's just great for anyone who maybe got their sex education from porn and is just a bit more primal or caveman-y about their approach. By that, don't judge yourself. Just say, I would maybe like to have more of my sexual advances reciprocated by women. So I want to gain some knowledge and insights and skills to do that a little more effectively. Ian Kerner's going to help you out. Let me read the back. As women everywhere will attest, men are, quote, ill-cliterate. Most guys know more about what's under the hood of a car than under the hood of a clitoris. But in the world of She Comes First, the mystery of female satisfaction is solved and the tongue is proven mightier than the sword. According to sex therapist and evangelist with the female orgasm, Ian Kerner, oral sex isn't just foreplay, it's core play. Simply the best way to lead a woman through the entire process of arousal time and time again. Can you say, Viva la vulva? Fun and informative, She Comes First is a virtual encyclopedia of female pleasure, detailing dozens of tried and true techniques for consistently satisfying a woman and ensuring that sexual fulfillment is mutual. Just quickly, because I can't not say this, since we're talking about clitoracy, less than 25% of women get off with just vaginal penetration. If you're not paying attention to your woman's clitoris, boys and girls, but I'm mostly talking to boys because girls are probably paying attention to it, pay attention to your lady's clit. Everything will change for you. Really. Reedy and Kerner, get your girl off first, watch what happens to your sex. So the next author I'm going to recommend, I love him, but I would definitely recommend him for more psychologically oriented people. He is psychoanalytic or psychodynamic, which means he kind of follows in the Freudian tradition, which really just means that he puts emphasis on our early relationships with our primary caregivers and how those really impact our expectations in all of our relationships, our expectations about what it means to be a human in the world, what it means to receive love, to give love. All of that is kind of, the foundations for that are laid by our experiences with our primary caregivers and our early caregivers. And so Harville Hendrix, Get in Love You Want. Hendrix has a theory that all of us have what's called an imago, or kind of a sum composite of the positive and negative qualities of our primary caregivers. And we're gonna tend towards seeking out partners which also match that. So you might find a partner who is like your mom and dad in some ways, and people that are able to stay together and work through their relationships will experience certain triggers because they'll be reminded of their parents in certain ways. But if we've picked a partner that's really compatible, we can get healing through experiencing those early kind of triggering things, but then also getting love and affection and sex and affirmation. And so we can heal from those almost early wounds and things we might experience from our early caregivers. But because we tend to find people that are so similar to our parents, you might say that's why we have such a high divorce rate. A lot of people just can't get past those triggers and they can't heal from it. It just becomes more painful, and so that's when you see divorces. But I would recommend this book, even though it's a guide for couples. I'd recommend it for singles as well, because it really helps you kind of see patterns and learn to be a bit more conscious and aware about the people that we're attracted to and the reasons behind that, and empower us a bit more to select partners that would really be compatible for us, and not just partners that we're maybe unconsciously attracted to because they just remind us of our early caregivers.